So looking at the equations for a isotropic material last time, so let us just write down what the governing equations are for that particular case here. So we saw that the equation del dot tau plus rho v is equal to rho times del square u by del t square. Okay, so that is the balance of linear momentum. Then we have tau is equal to lambda of trace of epsilon times identity plus 2 mu times epsilon. Okay, so this is the constant relation, and then we also have epsilon is equal to half of del u plus del u transpose. Okay, so here we don't make this distinction between the deformed and the undeformed configuration. So as we said that basically, see, when you are applying the boundary conditions now in linear elasticity, so for example let us just take this pressure loading. So actually, see, now because when the pressure loading is applied, the material, the cantilever will deform like this, right? And then the pressure will be acting on the inclined that surface or curved surface. But in linear elasticity, we will assume that actually the pressure acts on the original configuration. So this is something that we should keep in mind throughout the course, that in linear elasticity it is an approximation that the pressure or the forces will act on the reference configuration. So we don't need to worry about the fact that the pressure will change its direction so in large deformation problems we need to do that, but as I said that for the purposes of this particular course we will just assume that all the boundary conditions are acting on the undeformed configuration or the reference configuration. Okay, so all these derivatives are just with respect to the position vector, that is x, capital X here. So this capital X is with respect to the reference configuration itself. Also, so this rho we can just take it to be a constant. So as I said that we will basically try to simplify things for this assumption, that under these assumptions that we are making here. And so last time I also wrote the Navier equations of elasticity. So if you substitute this epsilon into this equation tau, and if you substitute this tau into this particular equation here, then you will also get the Navier equations of elasticity. Navier equations of elasticity. So that is rho times del square u by del t square, keeping x fixed, is equal to lambda plus mu times del of del dot u plus mu times del square u plus rho times t. So last time I think I wrote this Navier equations of elasticity for an isotropic material. So actually throughout this course now we will assume that the material is isotropic here. Fine. Then now let us look at the idea of a strain energy. Okay, so this strain energy is defined in the following way. So strain energy density first let us define. So strain energy density. So that is equal to half of tau matrix inner product times epsilon. So that is how we define the strain energy density. So this is in initial rotation, this will look like half of tau ij epsilon ij, or you can write this as half of C I j k l times epsilon ij epsilon k l. So here for writing the strain energy density, I am not assuming that the material is isotropic. I am writing it for the generalized Hooke's law here in this particular case. So we can write this also in the following form. So typically we can write this as half of epsilon c transpose times tau c. So this c, whatever I am writing with this subscript c, is what is known as the engineering strain. Okay, and this is the engineering stress. Yeah. So this epsilon c, I will write it as epsilon 1 1, epsilon 2 2, epsilon 3 3, then gamma 1 2, gamma 2 3, gamma 1 3. Okay, and this tau of C is equal to tau 1 1, tau 2 2, tau 3 3, then tau 1 2, tau 1 2, tau 2 3, and tau 1 3. Okay, so now you may wonder why there is a factor of 2 here, right? So this is gamma 1 2 is 2 times epsilon 1 2, right? But there is no factor here, right? So there is a factor of 2 when you are writing the strains but not the stresses. So the reason is that actually we want this product to be equal to this one, and so it is convenient. See, when we are dealing with applications, it is convenient to write the stress in this particular form here and the strain in this particular form here, because then we can just write it in a matrix form. You know, so like last time we saw that, right? You can write this as a matrix times epsilon c, correct? This particular vector here. So it is, so since it is convenient for when we are considering, like, let us say if you want to write a computer program, it is very convenient to deal with matrices, right? And instead of thisCijkl, which is very difficult to program. So because of that reason, we will write this in this particular form. So this will be a 6 by 6 matrix, and it is very convenient. So last time, I think if you remember, we had written C11, C12 up to C16 and so on, right? So same. So this writing it in a 6 by 6 matrix is convenient. So now you will see that you need to introduce this factor 2 so that this tau ij epsilon ij is equal to this epsilon c transpose times tau c. So let us just look at that. So epsilon tau ij epsilon ij is equal to tau 1 1 epsilon 1 1 plus tau 2 2 epsilon 2 2 plus tau 1 2 epsilon 1 2 plus tau 2 1 epsilon 2 1. Okay? So I am writing it only for 2D. Okay, so let me just state that here. So I am not writing it for the full 3D, but 3D situation is very similar to this, so we don't need to worry. So now you can see that these last two terms here, right? So this is equal to tau 1 1 epsilon 1 1 plus tau 2 2 epsilon 2 2 plus 2 times tau 1 2 times epsilon 1 2. Correct? Because that is because tau 1 2 is equal to tau 2 1. And epsilon 1 2 is equal to epsilon 2 1. So that is the reason that you will get this 2 factor in there. Okay. And now you will see that when I write this tau c, correct, in this particular form, then you will see that this 2 is being absorbed in the gamma 1 2. Correct. So this so that is the reason. So this 2 times epsilon 1 2, I am writing it as gamma 1 2 in here, and then I am multiplying it by tau 1 2. So that I get exactly the same product from this particular expression. So this is epsilon c transpose times tau c. So that is the reason that we need to introduce this engineering strain. Now this is just a matter of convention. You could have absorbed this 2 factor also in the tau 1 2, or you could have made it root 2 here and root 2 here, and various combinations are possible. But this is something that is accepted as a convention throughout the engineering community. So we call this as an engineering strain, correct? And this is the actual stress. So one very important thing to remember here is that although we are writing the stress like a vector and also the strain like a vector, the transformation properties are still those of a second order tensor. So you have to remember that. So just because I write it like a vector doesn't mean that it becomes a vector. Okay, so this is very, very important. So when you are transforming the stress, you still have to transform it like what we discussed, right? This is q times tau times q transpose. So it is very important to remember this, that the transformation of the stress from one coordinate system to another coordinate system still follows the tensorial rule. So this is just for ease of computer implementation and things like that. Okay, so this doesn't make it into a vector. So the stress still remains a second order tensor. So that is why I am putting this subscript c for like a column vector like that. I am just saying that. So this is not really a tensorial representation. So in the tensorial representation, all your usual transformation laws still hold. Fine. Then So here I have defined the strain energy density. Now let us talk about the total strain energy. So the total strain energy. So strain energy is equal to integral over the volume of half of tau times epsilon times dv. Or this is also equal to half of tau ij epsilon ij times dv over v. Okay, so this will be the total strain energy within a body, whatever volume that you are considering. If you wanted to find out what is the total strain energy within that, then this would be the particular result here. Right, then see, actually if we assume now this major symmetry for Cij/KL, so let us just write that here again. Whatever last time we had discussed this major symmetry. So this last time we had said that this Cij/KL is CKLij. Right? This was the major symmetry that we had assumed. So now if I write this U, this is the strain energy density. Strain energy density. So this is equal to half of Cij/KL epsilon ij epsilon KL. Correct? And now if I differentiate this with respect to the strains, then let us see what we get. Okay, so del U by del epsilon mn, let us call it, that is equal to the derivative of this, so that is half of Cij/KL epsilon KL delta let's say L, this is I m delta Jn plus so plus half of Cij/KL times delta Km delta L n times epsilon. Okay, so when you differentiate, so basically when you differentiate epsilon ij with respect to mn, you get when you are differentiating ij with respect to mn, you will get delta im delta jn. Similarly, when you are differentiating kl with respect to mn, you will get delta km and delta ln. So that is what is written. And then after this point, you can just use the substitution operator property. This is equal to half of Cmn kl Cmn kl epsilon kl plus half ofCijmn epsilon ij. Okay, and this you can write as Cmn kl times epsilon kl, because see, now we have assumed that this major symmetry is existing. So that means since C of mn kl is equal to C of kl mn. So because we are assuming major symmetry, so this and this is the same, and therefore we can write it in this particular way. But this is nothing but tau mn. Right? So this is equal to tau mn. So what we have seen now is that so here this is n here. So this what we have seen now is that basically tau ij is equal to del u by del epsilon ij. So this is the relation. So if you basically differentiate the strain energy density with respect to the strain, then you get the stress. Okay, so this is the so as I said that such a material is called as a hyperelastic material. So whenever there is a strain energy density from which you can derive the stress function, like in this particular case by taking the derivative of the strain energy density function with respect to the strain. If you get a stress, then that is known as a hyperelastic material. Okay, so this let us now see what the strain energy density is for an isotropic material. So if you see in this particular case, we just assume measure symmetry. So that is this particular relation, but we did not assume the material to be isotropic. So if we have isotropic, then we can write the strain energy density in a very compact way here. So your U now, suppose if you write it as half of tau ij epsilon ij, where now your tau ij is equal to lambda times epsilon kk times delta ij plus 2 mu times epsilon ij. Correct? So this is now for an isotropic material. If I write the expression for the strain energy density, then I will get that this is equal to half of lambda times epsilon kk the whole square. So that is just trace of epsilon the whole square plus mu times epsilon ij epsilon ij. This is so this is nothing but a trace of epsilon. So it's basically trace of epsilon the whole square. Fine. So if you want, you can write this as maybe if you wanted to write this completely in initial notation, maybe you can write this as epsilon mm or something like that plus mu times epsilon ij epsilon ij. So this is maybe the more correct way of writing the same thing. And so this is the strain energy density for an isotropic material, right, in terms of the Lame parameters here. Fine. So now let us look at what is the inverse relation. So we have already discussed this particular relation here, right? Tau ij is equal to lambda times epsilon kk times delta ij plus 2 mu ij. Now let us look at what the inverse relation is. So here from this particular relation here, so I will again erase this particular part here. So from this you will see that if you take the trace of this particular relation, then you will get tau kk is equal to 3 lambda plus 2 mu times epsilon kk. Right? That is basically because delta ii will be equal to 3, and so that is why you get 3 lambda, and so that is this 3 lambda and then this 2 mu, and then this is what you will get. So you can write this particular relation now. So from this particular relation, what you will get is that tau ij is equal to lambda times tau kk divided by 3 lambda plus 2 mu times delta ij plus delta ij plus 2 mu times epsilon ij. Right, and then now this allows me to invert the relation. So I will get that epsilon ij is equal to 1 by 2 mu times tau ij minus lambda tau kk divided by 2 mu times 3 lambda plus 2 mu times delta ij. Okay, so this is now the inverse relation for this particular relation here. That's whatever, if I write tau in terms of the Lame parameters and in terms of epsilon, then the inverse relation. So this is the stress-strain relation. This is the strain-stress relation now. So this is the inverse of that particular relation here. Right. So I can also find now the relation between the Lame constants, right, and the Young modulus and Poisson ratio. So that is what we are going to do next here. So yes, so let us look at that now. So we'll keep this relation here. This I will need. Yes, so suppose if I have simple shear now, simple shear. So this we have already looked at when we were dealing with the chapter on kinematics. We already saw that, right? And so now you will get that tau of xy will be, or let me write it in terms of 1, 2. So tau 1, 2 will be equal to mu times gamma 1, 2. So this comes actually, see, this comes from the fact that your tau ij is lambda times epsilon kk times delta ij plus 2 mu times epsilon ij. Correct? So in this particular case, all the normal strains are 0. Correct? So this basically gamma 1, 2 is the only non-zero strain in this case, only non-zero strain. And so this is what you will get, right, as the only non-zero stress in this particular case here. So this is just like a block. So you can imagine that this is a block, and then you are shearing it, right? So this is your simple shear. So we saw that last time. And here in this particular case, we can even deduce now certain bounds on this lambda and mu using these 3 cases as a thought experiment. Now, the 3 cases that I am going to talk about are simple shear, then the uniform compression of a sphere, and the third is a unidirectional extension of a bar. Okay, so this first we are considering this simple shear case here. Now you can see that if I apply a shear stress tau 1, 2, so this is your tau 1, 2, then you would expect that this is, let's say, your gamma 1, 2. Physically, we can interpret this as gamma 1, 2. So if I try to shear a block in this particular direction, then this angle will be positive, right? That whatever gamma 1, 2 angle that I have shown will be positive, right? And so we expect that this gamma 1, 2 is in the same direction as this tau 1, 2. So it will not happen that we are applying a shear in this particular direction and the block actually moves in the reverse direction, right? So physically, we expect that tau 1, 2 and gamma 1, 2 are both positive, right? So physically expect that tau 1, 2 is greater than 0 if gamma 1, 2 is greater than 0, or the other way around, maybe gamma 1, 2 is greater than 0 if tau 1, 2 is greater than 0. So if I apply a shear in this direction, the angle is also in this particular direction. So this implies now that mu is greater than 0. So this is the first conclusion that we get out of this thought experiment here. Fine. Then the next thing that we are going to consider is uniform compression. Now, uniform compression of a sphere. Compression of a sphere. So basically here what we are doing is that we are taking a sphere and then we are just applying uniform pressure, okay, on all the sides like this. Okay, so just apply a pressure, uniform pressure to a sphere. So you're just compressing a sphere from all directions like this. So and then in this particular case, what you would expect is that you would expect a hydrostatic state of stress, hydrostatic state of strain also. So you will get, in this particular case, you will get that epsilon is equal to minus epsilon tilde times id. Okay? So this epsilon tilde is some scalar that is greater than 0. So epsilon tilde is greater than 0, and this is what you would expect. And then similarly, in this particular case, what you would expect is that the tau is also a hydrostatic state of stress. So this will be minus p times I. And this is equal to minus 3 lambda plus 2 mu times epsilon tilde times I. So what I have done is that I have simply substituted this epsilon equal to minus epsilon tilde I into the relation that tau is equal to lambda trace of epsilon plus 2 mu epsilon ij. So basically I am just substituting epsilon equal to minus epsilon tilde I in this particular relation here. Okay, and then from that I will get this particular relation. So this p here is nothing but some quantity that is greater than 0. So this p is greater than 0. Right? So that is what you would expect So basically what we are saying is that if you apply a pressure, compressive pressure, then the material will shrink. That is what you would expect. So you do not expect physically that you are applying a compressive stress and the material expands. Correct? So that is counterintuitive. So here we expect that this P is greater than 0. Right? So I expect, so this is expect that this P, whatever I am writing, then this P is nothing but this 3 lambda plus 2 mu into epsilon tilde. And since epsilon tilde is greater than 0, we get that 3 lambda plus 2 mu is greater than 0. So this implies now that 3 lambda plus 2 mu is greater than 0. So this is the second bound that I get. So first bound was based on the simple shear, so that is mu greater than 0. The second bound is based on a uniform compression of a sphere that says that 3 lambda plus 2 mu is greater than 0. And now the last thought experiment is that of a unidirectional stretching of a bar. So that we have again considered in the chapter on kinematics. So let us again go over that again. Right. So, so suppose if I have now a bar unidirectional extension, so pure extension. So this is pure extension. So this is our bar, and let us call this as the one direction, let us say. And so here in this particular case, what you will get is that all your other stresses. So you can imagine that you are just applying some uniform pressure on these two sides. And so this bar is extending just because we are applying a uniform pressure on its ends here. And then in this case, what you would expect is that tau 11 is not equal to 0. Remaining all the stress components are 0. Remaining all 0. Okay, so all 0. See, because it also has to satisfy the traction-free boundary condition on the lateral surface. So all the remaining stress components will turn out to be 0 in this particular case here. So what you will get is that you will get epsilon 11 is equal to tau 11 divided by E. Correct? So this I am now here using the so this is just based on the 1D definition of the stress and the strain, right? So this, what I am doing here is that this is my 1D picture, right? So this is my stress, so this is tau 11 and this is my epsilon 11, and so I define the slope of that as E, correct? So this epsilon 11 is tau 11 by E, and we define the Poisson ratio as the lateral contraction, right? So if you are pulling this, then there is a lateral contraction. So that contraction we are defining as the Poisson ratio. So this, so what you will get here is that epsilon 22 is equal to epsilon 33 is equal to minus mu times tau 11 divided by E. So this is how, so if you recall your strength of material, this is how we define the Poisson ratio, right? So that is the contraction in the lateral direction when we are pulling in the longitudinal direction here. So from this, and what about the shear? So they are all 0. So epsilon 12 is equal to epsilon 23 is equal to epsilon 13 is equal to 0. So all the shear strains in this particular case are 0, right? So so now what I will do is that I will use this particular relation here. So let's see what we get by using this particular relation. Yes. So let us call this as star. So if I use star now, then what do I get? So from star, I will get that epsilon 22 is equal to minus lambda divided by 2 mu times 3 lambda plus 2 mu times tau 11. Okay, so that is what you will get from this star here. And so from this, what I will get is that this implies that, so you compare it now, okay, so this epsilon to 2, you compare it against this, so these two expressions are the same. So from this I will get an expression for this particular quantity. So I will get that lambda by 2 mu times 3 lambda plus 2 mu is equal to mu divided by E. So this is what I will get. Then similarly, I will also get that epsilon 1 1 now from the same relation from star. What I will get is that this is lambda plus mu divided by mu times 3 lambda plus 2 mu. And this, again, if you compare it against this particular expression, right, then you will get that this coefficient is the same as 1 by E. So this implies, so let me just write it directly. So this implies that E is equal to 3 lambda plus 2 mu times mu divided by lambda plus mu. So this is the relation that I get for E as a function of lambda and mu. And so once I get this particular relation, I can substitute it into this particular relation here. So these two relations together will give me mu is equal to lambda divided by 2 times lambda plus mu. So these are now the two relations that we have derived. Okay, so these are the relations. So that is how we get this. So now what we have done is that if you give me the Lamé parameters lambda and mu, I now know how to calculate the Young modulus and the Poisson ratio. Correct? So from these two relations here. Then similarly I can now invert, right? I can invert these two relations, and then I can find lambda and mu in terms of E and mu also. Correct? So let us do that. So let me call these two relations as double star. So if I invert now, so inverting these two relations here, what I will get now is that mu is equal to E divided by 2 into 1 plus mu. And we also get lambda is equal to mu times E divided by 1 plus mu times 1 minus 2mu. And if you recall, we call this quantity also as G. In your strength of materials courses, you will typically denote this mu as G. So basically this mu, one of the Lamé parameters, is the same as your shear modulus, right? So this is because, see, we saw that tau 1 2 is equal to mu times epsilon 1 2, right? And in your strength of materials, this you would call as G of epsilon 1 2. So this G and the mu, they are the same basically. So what we have done now is that we have found out a relation between lambda and mu in terms of E and mu, and E and mu in terms of lambda and mu. Right? So these are now all these relations. So this is also this is the other relation. So again, as I keep repeating, you do not have to memorize any of these relations. If required, I will give them, but you should understand how these relations are derived. So here you can see that if I give you lambda and mu, I can compute E and mu. Here in these relations, if I give you E and mu, I can compute lambda and mu. Right? So these are the inverse relations from this particular thing. Okay, so then so star. Now, so if I substitute now, so now star can be written in the following way. Now star can be written as epsilon ij is equal to 1 plus mu divided by E times tau ij minus mu divided by E times tau kk times delta. This is also another way of writing the relation in this particular way. Okay, so if I write this in component form, then let us see what I get. So I will get that epsilon xx, for example. So here I am identifying 1 with x, 2 with y, and 3 with z. Right? So then epsilon xx is, so if you simplify this, you will get that 1 by e times tau xx minus mu times tau yy plus tau z. So this is the usual relation that you have already studied in your strength of materials, right? So they have now derived this particular relation. So basically what we did is that we first assumed that the material is isotropic. Then we derived the most general form of the constitutive relation for an isotropic material. So that is that tau is equal to lambda times trace of epsilon times identity plus 2 mu times epsilon. Then from that we inverted that relation. So then we got epsilon in terms of tau and the Lamé parameters. Then finally we derived a relation for the Lamé parameters in terms of the Young modulus and the Poisson ratio, and when we substituted that into the strain stress relation, then we got this particular relation. And as I said, you are already familiar with this relation from your strength of materials days, right? But there we did not derive it in such a systematic manner, but now we are deriving this particular relation in this systematic manner here. Fine. So of course you can write this in a tensorial form. So this let us just do that. So this can also be written as epsilon is equal to 1 plus mu divided by E times tau minus mu divided by E times trace of tau times identity. You can also write it in the tensorial form in this particular way. Yeah. So now, see, we have now derived bounds on the Lamé parameters. Now let us use those bounds to derive bounds on E and mu also. Okay? So let us do that. Fine. So what we had done, so let me just erase a part of this. Yes, so so far, based on the simple shear and based on the uniform compression, what we have deduced is that 3 lambda plus 2 mu is greater than 0, and we had said that mu is greater than 0. So these are the two inequalities that we have derived based on thought experiments. Now, basically, see, now if you use these relations, right, E in terms of lambda and mu or lambda and mu in terms of E, then these relations, right, will imply, so this is if and only if, okay, E greater than 0, so E greater than 0 and minus 1 less than mu less than half. Okay, so these are the, this is what you will get. So these are the bounds that you will get. So this is so E greater than 0 and minus 1 less than mu less than half. So 3 lambda plus 2 mu greater than 0, mu greater than 0 implies that E greater than 0 and minus 1 less than mu less than half, or conversely E greater than 0 minus 1 less than mu less than half implies that 3 lambda plus 2 mu greater than 0 and mu greater than 0. Okay, so now you will see that something very strange has come out of this whole thing, right? And what is that strange thing here? The strange thing is that the Poisson ratio is allowed to be negative, correct? So that basically you can see that actually you can see that the Poisson ratio can be anything which is greater than minus 1. So it can be, for example, it can be minus 0.5. So what does a negative Poisson ratio imply, right? So suppose if I am pulling the rod in this particular direction, then instead of contracting in this particular direction, the bar can expand in the lateral direction, right? So that is what a negative Poisson ratio would imply, right? So I'm pulling it this way and it expands in this particular way. So then you may say that volume conservation is violated, but there is no such law as volume conservation, right? So basically all that we have is mass conservation, right? Volumes need not be conserved. So yes, if you have a negative Poisson ratio and if you pull a rod, then the volume will increase, but that is perfectly fine. So the density would decrease correspondingly, so that the mass remains the same. Okay, so now the question arises whether such negative. So what we have seen is theoretically we are allowing a negative Poisson ratio, but in practice now do we see a negative Poisson ratio? Okay, so certain foam type materials actually have a negative Poisson ratio. Okay, so that means if I, as I said, if I pull it in one direction, it expands in the lateral direction. But see, the question there is whether a foam can be considered as a continuum material. See, because it has pores in it, right? The foam material has pores in it, and so whether that can be considered as a continuum is itself questionable. Since this whole derivation is based on the assumption that the continuum assumption holds, and so whether these foams can be considered as a continuum. So that is the reason that actually maybe whether we should say that the foam is an example of a negative Poisson ratio is not very clear, because as I said that the continuum assumption is violated. So at least let us say that among materials where the continuum assumption is not violated, right, there at least we don't see any negative Poisson ratio materials. Okay, so that so for example, for ductile materials like steel and aluminum, right, steel or aluminum, the Poisson ratio is of the order of 0.25 to 0.3. So you are all familiar with that. Or if you take rubber type materials, right, so rubber type materials, the Poisson ratio nu is close to half. Okay, so but less than half, of course, because it has to be less than half. So you can say like 0.49 or something like that. You know, so very close to half basically. So what happens is that rubber materials are almost close to being incompressible because the Poisson ratio is close to this half here. So that actually is captured by the bulk modulus here. So let me just write that here. So so we have seen that this tau in the uniform compression. So if you go back to the uniform compression case, so let us go back to that. We have tau is equal to minus p times identity. So that is equal to minus 3 lambda plus 2 mu times epsilon tilde times I. So we saw it, right? And so this 3 lambda plus 2 mu is what is known as the bulk modulus. So this or 1/3 of that. So actually lambda plus 2/3 mu is called as the kappa. That is the bulk modulus. So that is what we define as the bulk modulus here. And so this 3 lambda plus 2 mu comes out to be, so 3 lambda plus 2 mu comes out to be E divided by 1 minus 2 mu. So you can see that, so from this expression, you can see that if nu becomes half, okay, so assume that it gets to the upper limit here. Then what happens to this limit, right? So then this blows up, right? So this 3 lambda plus 2 mu becomes infinity, right? So this basically what that says is that then your this epsilon tilde becomes 0 because you are dividing by infinity here. So what happens is that suppose if you have a perfectly incompressible material, which is this nu equal to 0.5, then basically there is no change in the volume, right? So basically you are suppose if you take a rubber ball and if you try to compress it, you will see that you will not be able to compress it by much. That is because the nu is close to 0.5. So of course I am talking of a solid rubber ball, not not the hollow one. So there, of course, you can squeeze it, but if you take a solid rubber ball, then you will see that you will not be able to compress it much. That is because the nu is close to 0.1. So of course, you will be able to compress it, but by very little. Whereas if you conducted the same experiment on some other materials, you will be able to compress it much more in terms of the volume. So yeah, so this basically gives us the relation between the bulk modulus and the Young modulus and the Poisson ratio. And so we have also seen what happens in the case of almost incompressible materials. So just one last thing for today is what about thermoelasticity? So actually in this course we will not do thermoelasticity, but I will just mention it in any case. So how does the relations get modified for thermoelasticity? Thermoelasticity, thermoelasticity. So here your epsilon xx, let us call it, that is equal to 1 by E times tau xx minus nu times tau yy plus tau zz plus alpha delta t. Okay. So this is the coefficient of thermal expansion. Similarly, your epsilon yy is also the same thing, 1 by E times tau yy minus nu times tau xx plus tau zz plus alpha delta t. So delta t is the change in temperature, alpha is the coefficient of thermal expansion, and epsilon zz is equal to 1 by E times tau zz minus nu times tau xx plus tau yy plus alpha delta t. Okay? And the shear strains are not affected. So that is what you have to remember. So your gamma xy is 1 by mu times tau xy. Gamma yz is 1 by mu times tau yz, and the gamma xz is equal to 1 by mu times tau xz. So the thermal part does not affect the shear stress, shear strain relation, but only the normal stress, normal strain relations here, right? So this is, so yeah, we will stop at this.